A warm welcome from UN Global Compact Network Sri Lanka to our esteemed panelists and participants for this webinar titled Climate Resilient Supply Chains, Transforming Risks into Opportunities. I'm Amjad Azmir, the Private Sector Associate for the UN Global Compact Network Sri Lanka. Firstly, I would like to request participants to post any questions to the panelists via the chat box or the Q&A function, and the moderator will accommodate as many as time permits. So this topic is of particular importance because, as we know, the IPCC Sixth Assessment Report, which came out recently this August, reaffirmed that lives, livelihoods, infrastructure, and supply chains is already at risk due to climate extremes. Climate and weather-related disasters have surged fivefold over the past 50 years. This webinar will focus on the concept of climate risk in relation to supply chains. The moderator for this session is Yasangi Randeni, who is the General Manager for Business Development and Sustainability at Aitken Spence. Yasangi is also a steering committee member of the UN Global Compact Network Sri Lanka and was recently appointed as a director on the board of CSR Sri Lanka. So with that, I'm humbled to pass on the mic to Yasangi to lead this session.
Thank you, Amjad. Indeed, the Intergovernmental Panel on Climate Change, the Sixth Assessment Report reiterates what we already know. Unless we take urgent action to mitigate climate change, we will soon reach a point of no return. South Asia is amongst the most vulnerable globally to the impacts of climate change, and I think we bear witness to that as well. Extreme climate-related events such as heat waves, storms, floods, fires, and droughts affect more than half of the region's population every year and continue to burden our economies. And as companies operating out of this region, most of the participants in UN Global Compact Sri Lanka network and the networks in this region, we need to strengthen our efforts to mitigate as well as adapt to climate change. Supply chains are an important and a powerful component in our economy to connect people with products and services. Managing supply chain risks is perhaps no big deal for experienced supply chain executives. But what if the entire business model that we're used to changes? What if the risks that we are used to suddenly change? What if those risks and disruptions are unparalleled and unpredictable? COVID-19 brought the entire world to a standstill. Climate change will make COVID-19 look like a walk in the park. Existing acute risks from weather events will become more severe, more frequent, and more widespread. Chronic risks like sea level rise will create new challenges. What can we do to be better prepared for such risks? What can we do proactively? How can we build resilience in our supply chains so that our supply chains can bounce back from any disruption? To help us understand a little more about climate change related risks to the supply chains and to proactively take efforts that we can establish to build resilience within our supply chains, the UN Global Compacts Network Sri Lanka has put together this esteemed panel with topic experts and industry panelists, or industry specialists. So without further ado, let's get right to it. Our first panelist is Ms. Ashwini Hingne, Senior Manager Climate at World Resources Institute, India. Ashwini holds a master's degree in Public and Economic Policy from the London School of Economics, with a specialization in environmental and resource economics and a bachelor's degree in chemical engineering from the University of Mumbai. Prior to WRI, Ashwini worked as a climate change and sustainability consultant with Ernst & Young LLP in Mumbai, where she advised clients on climate change and carbon management, sustainability strategy, and carbon markets. She has also interned with Center for Policy Research in New Delhi, supporting research in energy efficiency and climate change for India. Ashwini, we warmly welcome you to share with us your insights on measuring and assessing climate risks in an organization. Over to you, Ashwini.
Thank you, Yasangi, and I hope I'm audible. I will be sharing my screen, and I hope you all can see my presentation. During the course of my presentation, I will keep my video off just so that we don't lose network. So just stopping my video there, and I hope you all can see my screen. So good afternoon, everybody, and thank you, Yasangi, for that very kind introduction. And thank you, UN Global Compact Network Sri Lanka, for having me here. Before we begin today, I want to take just a minute to share with you all a little bit about the work we do. So WRI, or World Resources Institute, for those of you who are not aware, is a global research organization. Our research focuses on issues at the intersection of climate and development. As an organization, we envision a planet where we meet our collective aspirations in the most optimal manner that also safeguard the environment that we are so deeply dependent on. We work on the most pressing issues of building better businesses, economies, energy systems, and cities. We also work on finding ways to better manage our food, forests, oceans, and water resources. We do this through our strong research, freely accessible tools and guidances, and by collaborating with partners across the world. So coming to today's topic, which perfectly aligns with what we mean by building better businesses, over the next few minutes, I will try to provide you all with a very brief overview of what it means to do business in today's world, where climate change seems like an outdated term and climate crisis actually sounds more appropriate. What kind of risks does this climate crisis present, and how does it really impact businesses? How can we identify, assess, and manage these risks so that we are not only better prepared for the future, but are also part of creating a sustainable future that truly enhances our collective prosperity? So to begin with, I would like to take you all back to the IPCC report, which has already been spoken about and which made headlines recently. So the IPCC scientists yet again warned us of the extreme weather events, irreversible damages to ecosystems and food systems, loss of life, livelihoods, and wiping off of wealth, if we don't take unprecedented and transformational changes to the ways in which we live, consume, and do business. In short, it is a code red for humanity. This code red for humanity is also a code red for business. Impacts of climate change will be disruptive to all businesses. One estimate puts the total value of financial assets at risk from business as usual at 24 trillion US dollars. And no community, person, or firm is without this kind of risk. So this is not just something in the future. In fact, according to Deloitte's global report, climate-related events are already affecting more than 1 in 4 organizations worldwide. This is the new normal. So 2020, as we all already heard, especially brought this realization of this undeniable fact that our health, environment, and our economy are inextricably linked. An impact on one of these will necessarily impact the other. And in an extremely interconnected world, this spans beyond national and regional boundaries. Impacts of climate change will affect the economy, and no matter where in the world these occur, they will affect everybody and all businesses. And we needn't look too far for examples. In fact, almost 10 years ago, floods in Thailand affected more than 14,500 companies worldwide, with losses to the tune of 15 to 20 billion US dollars. So in addition to the loss of life and property in one part of the world saw billions of dollars just wiped out from businesses. This butterfly effect is not just a possibility, but a common expected reality, be it extreme rainfall affecting textile supply chains or hurricanes affecting semiconductor supply chains. Therefore, it is integral to build in resilience in business. But what does this really mean? Actually, it means nothing more than what businesses are designed to anyway do, which is to reduce costs of doing business, improve efficiencies in manufacturing and in manufacturing process products, enhancing the quality of the products that they manufacture to meet their stakeholder expectations and future-proof their growth for disruptions, including disruptions by climate change. And at the end of the day, innovate so that all of these things can be done better each day and businesses outlive such temporary discussions. And on that note, I actually also want to mention why I have not separated supply chains here. Because managing supply chains essentially will mean doing all of these things and lead to reducing costs, improving efficiencies, enhancing quality, meeting stakeholder expectations, and like it's already been mentioned now, it will future-proof growth of businesses and help sustain them over the long run. In fact, supply chains are at the front and center of resilient businesses because on an average, supply chain GHG emissions or carbon emissions are more than 11 times as high as the operational emissions, because companies are facing up to $120 billion in costs from environmental risks in their supply chains alone and in the next 5 years. So managing climate risks in the supply chain is no longer just a good to manage risk, but a need to manage risk and is part of the core business. But despite that, managing supply chains poses a unique challenge in terms of the availability of data, the transparency with which the data is available, the capacity needs of the supply chain, the level of influence that the businesses have on their supply chain, and at the end of the day, resource constraints to actually invest in this. Therefore, managing supply chains means a much greater commitment, greater and sustained efforts, and investment of time and money. Yet, better management of supply chain can unlock opportunities and bring in cost savings. To just begin with, according to CDP, suppliers that undertook activities that cut emissions by just 620 million tons of CO2 also saved $33 billion in the process. But how can businesses really go about realizing this potential? So the first step, essentially, as you can see here, is to identify and understand the kind of potential risks across businesses and supply chains, to go beyond the existing paradigm of profits and look at how social, environmental, and political systems can impact business. It can impact employees and impact societies. The second step is to assess, quantify, and qualify these risks and their materiality to your business. How do these impact operations? How do these impact costs? How do they impact the market share of the business? And how do they impact financing, insurance premiums? How will they impact reputation and brand? And finally, how do they impact the very existence of the business in the marketplace of the future? The third step is to then try to avoid, mitigate, adapt, and manage these risks by building capacities, improving processes, by accounting for uncertainties, and by collaborating across partners. And finally, to truly integrate the ways in which business is done and in the ways in which strategies are formed, to ways in which products and technologies are designed and transform businesses that are aligned with the needs of the new world rather than just respond to the new reality. So let's look at the first step in a little bit more detail to understand what kind of risks are we been talking about when we talk about climate risk. So the first kind of risk is the physical risk, which relates to climate events that can cause destruction or losses in the physical assets of the business, which can threaten resources as simple as and as basic as utilities such as energy or water. And finally, risks to raw materials, minerals, spare parts, and services that are essential to business operation. The second kind of risks are the financial risks, which include stranded assets and investments, increases in insurance premiums, and risks to financing. The third risk would be social risks, which include labor disruptions due to climate events, mass migrations, and even local unrest due to scarcity of resources. The fourth risk is the market risk, which essentially alludes to the changes in customer needs as the climate evolves and as priorities evolve. And finally, the stakeholder priorities that continue to change. The final risk here is the regulatory kind of risk, which are changes in policies that will be implemented in response to climate change. For example, carbon taxes, sourcing requirements, and these will significantly impact businesses as well as the legal implications of climate-related events. And then there are also structural changes in individual sectors that are taking place, which may impact businesses. And I don't put these in either of the buckets previously shown because they don't really mandate change, but what we see are these shifts happening as we speak, not only affecting businesses, but the larger workforce, affecting gender, and especially critical to supply chains which employ this large workforce across developing economies especially. One such example is the shift in energy systems from fossil fuels to renewables that is going to change the way in which the power sector is currently employing people. The other change is the shift from traditional fossil fuel-based vehicles to electric vehicles. These will require not only upskilling and reskilling, but also will lead to job losses and skill gaps that will need to be met. Therefore, it is incumbent upon businesses to account for these changes and secure a future where the transition is just and fair to the entire value chain. So coming to the specific risks and assessing these risks. And there are multiple standards and disclosures available, but there is no one standard that fits everything. And there are even fewer standardized metrics to identify, measure, or quantify these risks. But most guidances suggest the following steps. The first is to map the material issues for the business and its supply chain, be it dependencies on key resources, the level of specialization of products or services that they require. Then the second step is to access scientific literature, local evidence, and conduct scenario analyses to estimate the probability of these anticipated issues or events. The third step then is to understand to what extent or what level is the business exposed to these kind of risks, and then to determine the extent to which that would make the business vulnerable. And finally, it is important to not only quantify but also qualify the relative risk across these different issues to the business. Finally, coming to managing these risks, and as simple as this slide looks, I think this is the sort of core of what we are trying to do here, and our fellow panelists will elaborate more on this. But essentially, managing climate risk would require businesses to not only try to predict disruptions, but to really expect disruptions as normal part of doing business, to be able to extend time horizons to not just look at the short term, but look at the long term. And this also translates into longer contracts, longer securing of resources, and longer planning of costs and product mixes. The third is to really look beyond the existing guidances, because our research at WRI shows that existing guidances on disclosures and risk assessments don't even cover half of the physical risks that IPCC has explicitly laid out. And so there needs to be a deeper consideration of the relevant risks for business in the place that they're operating, and the ones that are material to that business, depending on the region and the sector they belong to. The fourth is to deepen the engagement with supply chain, which again extends beyond just sort of creating norms, but to really build capacity, to invest time and resources, and to support change across the supply chain at the sort of workforce level. Finally, the expectation would be to adapt the businesses to this new reality and try to reimagine the ways in which the business is done, the products that are manufactured, and the way in which investment decisions are made at the business level. And finally, it is important to also collaborate with other players in the sector, because supply chain affects everybody, and the greater the number of bigger businesses that come together, the greater will there be willingness, as well as the willingness or the ability for supply chains to really adapt to this new environment. I will just end with a few resources here, which I'm sure once the slides are shared can be accessed by all the participants, which is the kind of disclosures and the kind of assessments that are available to look at risk, which include standards set by CDP, CTSP, GRI, as well as SASB and TCFD. A lot of you might be familiar with this, and this table sort of lays out the different functions that each of these disclosures will help you do. And depending on the business, like I said, there's no one standard method, but I'm sure everybody is reporting across different platforms. But to really assess supply chain related risks, there are different standards available, and businesses would be encouraged to look at what fits them and use them accordingly. So with that, I will just stop. I don't know if I ran too much over time, but I'm happy to answer questions, and I'm also turn off my video. Thank you.
Thank you, Ashwini. I think you covered a lot of information in a very short span of time. A gentle reminder to our participants to give us your questions in the Q&A option that you see at the bottom of your screen. And we will take all the questions at the end of this session once we have spoken and heard from our other two panelists as well. Thank you, Ashwini. So we now move on to our second speaker, who is Mr. Lasith Perera, Group Director, Supply Chain and Sourcing from MAS Capital Private Limited. Lasith oversees the company's global go-to-market strategies and execution for all brands, channels, and ecosystem development for sustainable supply chains. He leads multidisciplinary teams to deliver desired outcomes for MAS customers and partners. And Lasith has extensive strategy, digital, online transformation, and operational experience in retail and supply chains. Before joining MAS, Lasith has held a variety of leadership roles in diverse organizations in the United Kingdom. He has strong passion for people development, diversity, inclusion, and doing right by the planet. Lasith is a fellow of the Chartered Institute of Logistics and Transport UK and is an alumni at Cranfield University of Supply Chain Management. Lasith, thank you for joining us from UK. I hope you're having a good morning over there, and we would love to hear from you about the key pillars of change that MAS is focusing on to build resilience in the supply chain. Over to you, Lasith.
Sure, thank you. Thank you very much all. It's a pleasure to be here, and greetings to the UN Global Network Sri Lanka, and thanks very much for the introduction. I shall first kick off by doing a quick intro in respect of MAS organization, and then provide a presentation, a short one, in respect of our plan in respect of sustainability and the impact on supply chain. MAS organization is a design to delivery apparel manufacturer that originates from 1987, based in Sri Lanka, and is a business that's global in respect of its footprint of over 50 plants globally and across 16 countries, and we are 100,000 colleagues strong. And sustainability is very much, together with innovation, is very much in our heart. So that's a very quick intro in respect of MAS. In relation to climate change and the impact on supply chain practice, the adverse weather events that we are facing, more frequent, severe and longer, it has many disruptions on supply chains, irrespective of industry sector. The connectivity between sustainability and supply chain is inextricable. It is very much goes hand in glove. And the supply chains that are focused on sustainability tend to weather the storm better than supply chains who are less focused on sustainability. And at MAS, we are very early adapters of sustainability and workers' rights. It's very much embedded in our corporate mission, our value set, and our strategy. As we evolve with our customers, and our production strategy evolves, supply chains require renewed focus for strategy in context of resiliency, against the backdrop of climate change. So if I may just go to the slides, what I want to share with you today is our plan for change. This is very much of a live program. We have made some significant inroads in this space, and we got always a lot to do in this space. So if I may go to the slides. The first slide is about the apparel supply chain, the impact from climate change on apparel. It's very much of a McKinsey diagnostics slide that represents that the apparel industry is over-indexing in relation to the disruption that it faces in comparison with the other sectors. And that is because we are significantly reliant on nature. water, right weather, agriculture for cotton, for example, things of that nature. So it's an area of high interest, it's an area of strategic advantage to ensure that we have a supply chain that is best fit for today and also continually improving, managing risk, evolving to ensure that we continue to safeguard our competitive advantage and also do the right thing by the planet. Next page, please. So in terms of framework for supply chain adaptation and resilience, there are potential risks, which has been actually shared by Ashwini in the previous segment. There could be extreme patterns of weather and access to resilient manufacturing locations is an area of significant focus that require a level of diagnostics in terms of adding more footprint in an organization. And the availability of raw materials, fabric, yarn, elastic, things of that nature, they also becomes quite exposed, and it is very much in our interest to ensure that we protect the sourcing basin as well as the supply chain to ensure that there is a connectivity across the different components of the supply chain to ensure that we have a frictionless supply into our manufacturing plants. So in respect of mitigation and management, this is non-exhaustive. You know, there are risk assessments on water, chemicals, community, carbon, and climate diverse raw material supply chains. So how do we ensure that we have contingencies in place to ensure that we have continuing supply? Innovation and reputation, again, there is the customer promise that has to be kept, and therefore our reputation is not just on delivery, but also what we do in the supply chain arena in respect of doing what is right from an innovation, for example, material point of view, creating material that is sustainable. It becomes ever so more important. And really selecting our suppliers and our partners in our supply chain, if you like, the supply chain actors, to ensure that we all align in respect of our strategic agenda. So that gives us real connectivity, and also it makes perfectly good business to ensure that we align and our business growth is incentivized in the right places, that suppliers who invest in sustainability. Next slide, please. So climate change drivers, there are, I think, 3 buckets, to put it simply: regulatory, physical, and market. So you've got the policies and procedures, international accords, etc. that comes into play. Is very much of a top-down. So the level of compliance becomes and is critical in this space. And you got the physical impact from adverse weather patterns. As I mentioned before, they tend to be longer, they tend to be a lot more severe, and also unpredictable. That has an impact on raw material shortages and work colleague attendance. And the market is very much driven. Our customers are driven a lot more in relation to sustainable circular products, and therefore there is the pull, if you will, from the market for us to really get our strategic alignment in the right place to ensure that we are connected in respect of our value set. So supply chain management, therefore, it cuts into 2 buckets in our minds, one that is operational and the other being strategic. So strategic is very much of a control tower concept to understand risk in advance. So our posture is very much a proactive posture that we adopt to ensure that we see as much as we can in respect of manifestation of risk from a strategic point of view, and then also being able to therefore mitigate our operational risk. So the two things actually are linked, but the way that we approach is as two separate pillars to ensure that we are always on the front foot as much as we can be on the upstream to manage the downstream well. Next slide, please. Our plan for change at MAS is very much product related, lives, and our planet. Next slide, please. So in terms of product, we want to be focused on sustainability. So product that is less harmful to the environment, move away from a model of extraction, if you will, to go into very much of a model of sustainability. We want to be sourcing, and we are sourcing more sustainable products through innovation. We drive a lot more demand for sustainable fabric, elastic, etc., and really pioneer the circularity at scale. So we really want to upscale that space and really drive circularity that ensures that we have less landfill that goes into the environment. Lives change for good. This is something, an area equally we are proud of. We are very much of a organization that is focused on colleagues' welfare. We really do want to empower women. We have set ourselves a target of parity in terms of 1-for-1 at management. We've launched Women Go Beyond, for example, and we won a lot of accolades in this space, doing the right thing by our colleagues. So there is equality, fairness in our working conditions, etc. Meaningful employment, so very much a work-life balance, the right reward mechanisms in place, really foster diversity and inclusion. So all our colleagues' voices are heard. World-class workplace. We want to be one of the best globally in respect of go-to as an employer of choice, and we really want to do right thing by community. So really work with our community in harmony to ensure that the communities also thrive, as well as our colleagues and our business. From a planet point of view, very much limit the emissions. So these are all interconnected. So by having a sustainable product, limiting emissions, transform waste. We'll find that the fashion industry is very much there is a lot of excess, if you will, wasteful excess. And we are very much aligned to reducing that waste. Responsible chemicals really reduce our toxic gases. As you may well know, there is a high degree of usage of chemicals in apparel, and we want to be reducing level of hazardous gases from chemicals that we use. Safeguard water, so really want to be reducing the level of water that we use, and water that we use is recyclable. That's an area of interest for us, and championing biodiversity. So we set ourselves a target of restoring biodiversity 100 times of the footprint that we use in terms of restoration moving forwards. Next slide, please. So the key focus areas is from a supply chain point of view, from a supply chain focus for myself and my team on very much on 3 pillars. And we want to be really leading in this space, reducing our emissions, sustainable chemical management, and sustainable material development. Next page, please. So that is pretty much the conclusion. In terms of supply chain, just to wrap things, transparency is quite important for us. Our suppliers disclose impact of their activities on the environment. So we are working. We have programs in place that are strategically linked to the overall corporate strategy that really drives behaviors, the right behaviors, to ensure that we are very much aligned in terms of customer centricity, along with sustainable supply chain. That's all from me. I'm happy to take any questions that you might have.
Thank you, Lasith, for sharing your insights with us, especially from a company like MAS that is renowned for your sustainability practices and for taking a leadership in sustainability practices as well. I would like to again remind our participants to give us your questions in the Q&A panel at the bottom of your screen, and we will get to it at the Q&A session at the end of this webinar. Thank you again, Lasith, for your insights. We now move on to the third panelist that we have for you today. We have Mr. Saminda Deshapriya, Director and Chief Executive Officer of Logicare Private Limited, a leading third-party logistics company in Sri Lanka. With over 15 years of experience in logistics and operations, Saminda is also non-executive director of Ceylon Tea Brokers PLC, which is the second largest tea broking company in Sri Lanka. He previously served as the Chief Operating Officer of Ceylon Tea Brokers PLC, and Saminda is also a member of the Chartered Institute of Logistics and Transport Sri Lanka, the Association for Supply Chain Management USA, the Association of Business Executives UK, and the Chartered Institute of Marketing UK. Saminda holds an MSc in Logistics and Supply Chain Management from the Birmingham City University, UK, and an MBA from the Australian Institute of Business Australia. Saminda, we would love to invite you to share your experience with us on this topic that we are discussing on building resilience within the supply chain against climate change impacts, or like Ashwini said, the climate crisis that we are facing. Over to you, Saminda.
Thank you, Yasangi. And thank you very much, UN Global Compact Sri Lanka, for having me here today. I'm going to share my screen first. Okay, let's take a start by looking at what is climate change and what's the impact of climate change on our supply chains today. So we all have seen, I think the climate change has increases the weather-related natural disasters. We already felt that. Even in Sri Lanka, we have seen the weather patterns have changed, which has a significant impact on our supply chains. The global warming increases the likelihood of water-related natural disasters. If you compare from 1960 to 2019, for about last almost 60 years, increase in natural disasters on a global scale by 10 times. So a visible increase in the intensity and frequency of weather-related natural disasters. So that's why I think everyone in the world, we have started discussions about this climate change. So the next question would be how the climate change would affect our supply chains. As you are aware, the supply chains are no longer local due to cheap labor, land, raw material, and specialized technological skills, and also for market expansion. The supply chains have grown beyond local. It has gone to the level of regional and global. And also the number of supply chain partners have increased over the years. So therefore, we have seen the increased complexity in supply chain. The third factor is supply and demand dependency on large economies. Now, I think everyone, we have realized during the pandemic, there were in certain products from like toilet papers up to apparel to computers, there was a supply shortage that we have seen. Now, everyone talked about when the pandemic started in China in 2020 February. So everyone realized, okay, there are going to be supply shortages because the China export about $2.6 trillion worth of exports to the global economy. But what about their market size, the demand dependency? The same way they are the largest exporter and also they are the largest importer in the world. They import about close to $2 trillion worth of products to their country. If we consider the last, some of the last incidents happened, the supply chain disruptions happened due to weather-related natural disasters. For an example, floods in Thailand in 2011, which has affected the automotive supply chain, computer hardware supply chains. If you take the automotive supply chains, that year production itself was down by about 130,000 units. That's because Honda, Toyota, Ford, all these large-scale automotive manufacturers are now stationed in Thailand. Similarly, the same thing happened in Japan in 2011, the earthquakes and tsunami. There again, automotive and electronic equipment supply chains have got affected. If we consider the last 5 natural disasters which give the need for climate action, the first one would be the cyclone, the 2 cyclones in the South African region, March and April 2019, 2 cyclones within 2 weeks, 6 weeks. Then Australian wildfire, beginning of 2020, East Africa drought in 2011, 2017, and 2019. Then again, the recent floods in South Asia, India, Nepal, and Bangladesh. At one point, 1/3 of Bangladesh was underwater. The last one is the dry corridor in Central America for 6th year of drought. That's consecutive drought for 6 years. Then we are moving into the role of logistic industry in this climate action initiatives. Why the role of logistic industry is important. If you look at the mainly transportation for itself, transportation activities are responsible for approximately 17% of the global greenhouse gas emissions. So these transportation activities includes air, sea, rail, and ground transports into heavy trucks and light trucks. So the industry target itself is 30% emissions reduction by 2030 on average. This is the global target. But if you really compare the global target for manage the temperature, the global warming 1.5 to 1.5 Celsius in 2030. But to achieve that, the transport industry should reduce their carbon emission by 50%. So, but currently our target is only 30%. So without the industry's participation, countries will not be able to meet their goals for limiting the global temperature. The role of logistics is important to reduce the climate, the negative climate impact to supply chains. So now I'm moving into how the business case of Logicare, how my organization is fighting for climate actions. So Logicare Private Limited is a third-party logistics company in Sri Lanka. We have started our commercial operations about 2 years ago, and our services are ranging from warehousing, transportation, and all sort of value-added activities. So in terms of our strategy, how we approach sustainability in our business practices is as being a socially responsible corporate citizen. So what we believe is the sustainability begins with a principled approach. So it is the right thing to do. We all know that we have to fight against these climate disasters. And on the other hand, how we can convert some of these risks into opportunities because it makes economic sense. So therefore, we believe the environmental sustainability is important, and we have embedded that fact in our strategy. So in our business segments, warehousing and transportations mainly. In terms of warehousing, we always go for carbon neutral designs, used for all new warehousing buildings, and the requirement is supplied through rooftop solar power generation. And also we use, instead of diesel material handling equipments, we use 100% electric material handling equipments, forklift to reach trucks, everything. And also technology plays a bigger role in our climate action. So use of innovative technologies have helped us to reduce the number of the papers used, create a paperless environments in terms of warehousing management systems, RF devices. All these things have helped us to reduce the paper usage. Also, in addition to that, we have water conservation projects, rainwater harvesting systems, waste treatment plants. All these things are plugged in our warehousing segment. And also, we continuously do research and development in terms of how to reduce the usage of polythene and plastic within the warehouse, how we can recycle the same things. And also in terms of things like shrink wrapping, how we can reduce the shrink wrapping. So these are the things that we, day by day, we fight and we do research and development to improve ourselves. So these are the actions that we do. How these actions have affected our commercials, our top line to the bottom line. So our expected commercial benefits, we have seen the increase in brand value, increase in revenue, premium prices for green warehousing. Even in Sri Lanka, we have seen the clients are prepared to pay premium prices for sustainable warehousing practices or warehousing services. And also significant reduction in utility costs, water and electricity especially. And also because we are using innovative technologies in our warehousing environment, our efficiency have improved. Therefore, there is an overall reduction in operational cost. Then I'm moving into the transportation. Now, transportation, as I discussed earlier, contributes a lot to greenhouse gas emission. So how we have managed transportation is, we use transportation technologies to improve capacity management, route optimization, and also we are working towards to reduce the number of empty miles. If a truck drives from point A to point B, there's always, you have cargo on the truck, right? We don't have empty miles. And also use of environmental friendly vehicles in last mile logistics. We do last mile logistics. At the moment, we have about 30% out of our total vehicle portfolio, 30% trucks are hybrid trucks. So we are targeting to increase that to about 50%. So our total vehicle portfolio would have at least 50% electric and hybrid trucks. And also to improve operational planning to reduce the number of empty miles, as I discussed. And also the carbon offsets to become a carbon neutral company. So expected commercial benefits from all these initiatives are increase in brand value, increase in revenue, customers' willingness to pay more for sustainable transportation services, especially in multinational manufacturers in Sri Lanka. They prefer these green transportation initiatives, and they are willing to pay additional amount of money as transportation charges if we provide sustainable transportation solutions. So that's an incentive for the logistic industry to invest on these sustainable logistics practices. And also clear reduction in fuel cost, and also overall reduction in operational cost. So those are at very operational level, the business level, these are the activities that we practice to reduce the environmental impact and also to fight against the climate disasters. So on the other than these operational levels, so in terms of our strategy, I think like Ashwini explained, so what we have done is, these are our day-to-day activity. There's nothing new here, right? So all our climate actions are related to our business. As therefore, we have connected these two. We have connected the sustainability into business practices. With that, we'll get the benefit of efficiency, the cost reduction, increase in top line, all these things. On the other hand, in terms of risk management, we always think about what can happen in the future, what sort of unforeseen natural disasters can happen in the future, and we prepare for it, and also we make business continuity plans. Ashwini, over to you.
Thank you, Saminda, for your insights. Yes, thank you. Thank you, Saminda, for your insights and for sharing a lot of information about how your company has tackled this question of building resilience within the supply chain. And I think we would now go on to the Q&A session, because we have got a few questions in the Q&A panel as well. So we'll get right to it in the interest of time also. I think my first question I would like to direct to Ashwini. I saw Ashwini answering this question in the Q&A session as well, on the topic of sustainability or sustaining the business or sustaining the status as it is to regenerative technologies in sustainability or in supply chains. I also believe that sometimes in order to sustain the business and in order to sustain any organization, regenerative technologies and practices are part and parcel of sustainability practices. What is your view, considering the answers that you have already given us, Ashwini, what is your view in terms of opportunities for regenerative technologies and practices in the supply chain to build resilience against climate change? My first question to you, Ashwini.
Right. So like I just responded there, I think I responded privately, so maybe I will just reiterate. So I look at this as an opportunity. So two things. One is, I feel like we try to put a structure on things, but if we look at South Asia, actually regenerative practices have been the norm, even though they have been more informal ecosystems. And I think what is needed is for these larger companies to actually make it formal, to actually create the sort of, I mean, because for supply chain layer, I mean, themselves, it's harder to coordinate and harder to understand what is required from their customers. But the larger businesses have that potential to help bring these together and to then utilize the supply chain networks to regenerate. And I think there is some movement on this, especially in the textile sector. We have some research that we have done in India where there are newer business models that are coming up, where so the buyback options or even reuse, remodel options have been sort of explored by larger corporates as well as smaller sort of players that have come in. So I feel like this is not a barrier so much as something that needs to be done a lot more of, and has to be done a lot more of in high impact sectors, especially like the hard to abate sectors like automobiles, for example, or even textile sector, which is one of the highest sort of waste generating. So let me just stop there.
Thank you, Ashwini. I think you gave a very, vast amount of information in a short time, again, in a very interesting way. We will get back to you on that. Lasith, my next question is to you on the role of technology in, I think, strengthening resilience within the supply chain. I would like to know your views in terms of the opportunities that we have for our supply chains in utilization of technology in building resilience within the supply chains. Your views on that, Lasith?
Sure, I think it's a great question. I think I answered the question online. I think the role of tech in this space is huge. I think tech would allow us to do some of the heavy lifting in respect of forward visibility, forward risk management, and also transparency in respect of sustainability compliance from tier 2, tier 3 supplier base. So the simple answer is it's huge. It's an area that we have in supply chain capabilities. It's already in the market, and I think it's about adoption. I think a lot of the big players are already commissioning tech tools to do the heavy lift, and that is an area of significant interest for us at MAS.
Thank you, Lasith. I think you also gave us some insights in terms of sharing an example from MAS as well. I would like to now move on to Saminda with my next question. We speak about a lot of technologies. We speak about so many opportunities that are there in the in the business environment in terms of building resilience as well. But having said that, we are working with limited resources. There's a limitation in the availability of suppliers for certain products and services. There would be possible industry monopolies. There's cost involved. So in understanding all these dynamics as well, when we are aligning procurement and aligning procurement with sustainability, sometimes it can be a bit of a challenge. What is your view, Saminda, in terms of how we can balance limitations in resources and suppliers with building resilience and the technologies that are available? We'd love to hear from you, Saminda, on that.
Yeah, so to start with, I think the amount of knowledge, the awareness that the community, the Sri Lankan community has on the supply chain aspects are limited. So if we take, I think we have started this conversation only about, so let's say, last 5 to 10 years, whereas in terms of the other countries who have been working towards these goals in terms of global warming and other sustainability related areas. So improve the awareness, it's important. On the other hand, you have to understand what is your business and how your business would impact in terms of 3 pillars of sustainability, whether it's economic, social, and environmental. Then once you understand your impact on these 3 pillars, then you can select how we can reduce okay, I forgot one step. So once you understand, then you have to start reporting. You have to measure your impact and you have to start reporting. So then only you realize, okay, these are the areas that I can improve, and this is the supply, or this is the institute that I should go and ask for help, and this is the type of technology that I should spend. So to get that awareness, we need overall awareness as well as the awareness about our business and how our business would impact on sustainability.
Thank you, Saminda. Now, a question to all 3 panelists. How important is collaboration amongst companies and organizations in terms of building resilience within the supply chain? We speak of bridging strategies and buffering strategies, and Saminda also mentioned in terms of awareness and building understanding about the industry. But having said that, there is also competition that we need to be mindful of. So how important is collaboration within industries, within different businesses to build resilience as a whole, working towards development priorities? I would like to first give the question to Ashwini, and then we'll move on to Lasith and Saminda in terms of understanding your views about collaboration within industries to build resilience against climate change.
Right. So I think, I mean, in my personal sort of opinion, I think right now doing business a better way is sort of a requirement for businesses across the board. So when it comes to competition, I think it is in their interest to collaborate rather than looking at it as a competition, because the way they will be able to mobilize their supply chains, which are usually sort of also overlapping, is more effective. You know, how the sum of parts is more than the whole kind of a thing. So I think, and we're seeing examples of it, again, I'll repeat, in textile sector, for example, because that is happening. And I think that is a good way to create that kind of predictability even for the supply chain players, to know that it's not just one company or one customer that is expecting these standards or who is wanting this change, but it is across the board. And I think that should happen more of, and it shouldn't really threaten competition per se.
Thank you, Ashwini. Lasith, your views on collaboration within the industry?
It's rather similar, actually. I think we can only rise to this challenge by working together. And I think in respect of the demarcation lines on competition, I think it's less applicable in this space. I think there's a lot to be said for collaboration and partnership. That is across the piece, not just the actors within the supply chain management. It's with the customer base as well. I think there is a lot to be done and to be had by aligning the participants. And also really collaborating from a operational standpoint, where there are some synergies to be had. Those synergies can be made available and they'll be good for the planet, right? And some of those behaviors, some of those trends are already happening in some of the advanced economies today, right? And I think we should be a lot more open to really opening the door and working together as supply chain practitioners to achieve for the common good, would be my view.
Thank you, Lasith. Same question to you, Saminda. What is your view in terms of industry collaboration?
Yeah, for me, collaborations, I will look at it as two parts. One is you have to understand the supply chain that you are involved in, right? So because the competition is no longer between companies. Now the competition is between the supply chain. So if you are company A, the competition would be the supply chain of company A versus supply chain of company B. So if you are a supply chain partner in company A's supply chain, so it's your responsibility to collaborate with your other supply chain partners and look at the opportunity as a supply chain, the overall supply chain, how you can reduce the negative impact on the climate and also the other areas of sustainability. So the second part is the industry you are in. I think that the price competition, the market share, everything that you have to forget, because you are fighting against an enemy that you can't see, right? So when it comes to floods or windstorms, it won't just because of your market size, the impact would be same, right? So it's always more than lobbying, like more than making a noise about it alone. It's always good to be collaborate with other industry players, all the stakeholders and associations, and to build a meaningful conversation from there onwards. Take great initiatives which are good for the industry as well as for the world.
Absolutely, absolutely. On that note, I think a burning question that I have actually is how important consumer demand or consumption patterns, what kind of role does consumption patterns play in building resilience within the supply chain? For example, you're investing in a technology, but if there is no consumer demand for that particular product or service, an investor is taking a risk. Just very quickly, the open question to all three of you, what is your view of the role of consumer demand and consumption patterns on investment decisions for climate change resilience, building resilience in the supply chain?
I can go first quickly. And I can say this because I don't belong to the business community, but I think business has an important role to play to actually shape consumer demands, which it has done forever. It is only now that you can do it for something good. So I know, so we all know that a lot of products that we consume today are because the advertising and the marketing and the demand that is actually created for us by them. And I think, yes, a lot of decisions depend on consumer demand, but I think it is a responsibility of businesses to also create the right kind of demand. And if they do, it will of course get sort of lapped up. So if people want Tesla, right? So I really think it's on them to create the right demand as well.
Absolutely. I think we just have a few more minutes, if I may, Amjad, if I can take a few more minutes to ask my last question. Again, I would like to pose this question to Lasith, but an open question to both Saminda and Ashwini as well. The role of gender sensitivity or female representation in the supply chains when we speak of building resilience for climate change. Lasith, my first question to you, in terms of your views, especially from a company like MAS that has championed women in the workforce and women in supply chains as well. What do you think about the role of women in supply chains, and what kind of contribution do you think women can add on in building that sensitivity to gender and in building resilience within the supply chains?
I think the simple answer is huge, absolutely huge in respect of the value that gender diversity can add to business performance. And a lot of studies have now demonstrated that to both top line and bottom line. So that the evidence is out there, right? From MA's point of view, we are very much pioneers of this space, right? We want to keep improving the diversity base, very important to us. And I think from a supply chain standpoint, my sense is that we can do with I think more parity in this space, right? More skill in supply chain to bring to the businesses. I think there is a opportunity there to be had, right? If I may quickly come to the point, the question that you asked before, the consumer piece as to consumer driving some of the demand. If I may very quickly, the consumer patterns show that whether they are boomers, Gen X, millennials, or Gen Z, they're all now saying that they are prepared to pay a bit more for product that is less harmful to the planet, right? So that's number one. So the drive is already there. And from a business point of view, manufacturing point of view, that pull is there. And also innovate to create more demand of the right type. And there has to be the policymakers that comes into play to set the right policies, right boundaries to ensure that they're the right policies, best fit policies from a climate-centric point of view.
Thank you, Lasith. Anything that Ashwini or Saminda would like to add on to that before I go to my final question to the three of you?
I will just say that research has shown that climate will actually impact women a lot more across the board. And I think it is important that even within our workforce, we account for that and we ensure that it's not just that we employ women, but the kind of jobs that are created within our supply chains are also such that they are good quality jobs. And that will definitely, I mean, the way we say, if you build a stronger supply chain, it will only strengthen your business. It will definitely also contribute to resilience.
Absolutely, absolutely. Saminda, anything you would like to add to that?
Yeah, I will add something to the previous question in terms of the consumer behavior. So I think to answer to that question, like Ashwini said, that's the immediate responsibility of the manufacturer or the retailer to if you have a sustainable product, if you have a sustainable service, go to the market and create awareness, right? Because you will get the immediate commercial benefit. Right. So other than that, yes, the government, the NGOs, all these industry stakeholders have a responsibility of creating awareness to the entire country. But a particular customer segment, if you want to market the product or service a sustainable product, which is a new business model that we have created, it could be environmental friendly products. It could be something that you taken now for to address the climate change. So that is your responsibility to create a market way, because you will get that immediate commercial benefit.
Absolutely, absolutely. Thank you for those insights, Saminda. My final question to all three panelists, an open question to all three panelists today. Sometimes in development initiatives, there are some things that we absolutely need from policymakers. If there were one thing that you would recommend or that you would advocate for in terms of a policy change, or maybe a recommended policy that you would recommend for supply chains to build resilience within supply chains, especially when it comes to climate resilience and building resilience against the climate crisis that we are facing. If there was one thing that you would advocate for, what would that be? I would first ask Ashwini and then Lasith and Saminda if there was one thing that you would recommend or advocate for.
Yeah, so I think, sorry about that, I might have heard myself. So if there was one thing I would definitely say, put money where the mouth is. So for policymakers, it would be to create the right kind of financing instruments and finance available for supply chain players to implement better climate smart sort of investments, so be it technology, be it process improvements. So because businesses can only go so far to support them, but I think if there is greater availability of finance and access of finance for these kind of investments, that would definitely be very useful and required.
Absolutely. Lasith, any thoughts from you?
I would just say that as a principle, to make it easy. Make it less clunky, make it less friction, make it frictionless, right? To really operate in this space and make a difference. The other thing that I would say is that the Incentify in number of ways. There are a number of tools that you can incentivize to drive the right behaviors. Okay, so I'll leave the policymakers to, I think, define as to what that incentivization looks like. But I think you got to incentivize to drive the right behavior set, right? And that focuses the minds. So that's what I would say.
Absolutely. Thank you so much for that. Saminda, coming to you, what would you like to add to what has already been shared?
Yeah, a few things actually. Now, for an example, if you take the Sri Lanka's policy on renewable energy, so we have a target of achieving 40% of renewable energy out of our total power requirement by 2030. But this shouldn't be a hope, because hope is not a strategy. Right? So this expectation has to be strategized and should be operationalized. We have to appreciate the fact that there are a lot of power projects, the solar power project, hydro again, the wind power projects are even the waste to power projects are happening right now, right? And there were some funding schemes available connected to Asian Development Bank. But if you take the overall picture as the entire world, right? So in 2020, our target from 2020 to 2030 reduce the carbon emission by 7.6% every year. So even with lockdowns, and travel restrictions in 2020, the expected reductions only on 6%. So we are already late. So we need to be a little aggressive. And I think Lasith and Ashwini said the incentivizing and giving subsidies for supply chain sustainable initiatives, and as well as there should be a mechanism to penalize the polluters. That's my view.
Absolutely. Thank you so much for sharing your insights with us as well, Saminda. And I think Ashwini, Lasith, Saminda, I would like to thank all three of you for taking the time to be with us. And I would like to also request the audience to please excuse us for taking a few extra minutes, as we were tackling some very important and somewhat poignant questions that we had to tackle. So thank you once again for being with us and for sharing your insights with us on this very timely and very important topic. And I'm sure the audience were able to get a little bit more understanding on this topic of building resilience within our supply chains against climate change. There's, of course, a